KiwiCo projects are designed to spark creativity, tinkering, and learning in kids of all ages. They make learning about STEAM fun. They're on a mission to empower kids not just to make a product, but to make a difference. KiwiCo is offering Parenting Great Kids listeners the chance to try them for free. To redeem this offer and learn more about their projects for kids of all ages, visit KiwiCo.com/Meg. Any new parent will tell you that navigating parental leave benefits can be confusing and anxiety-inducing. In fact, employee benefits company Unum recently surveyed new parents and found that 43% never met with their employer to discuss their benefits prior to going on leave. An additional 35% said they didn't understand some of the key employee benefits being offered at their workplace. To help start the leave conversation with HR, check out Unum's parental leave guide at unum.com/parents. That's unum.com/parents. For 30 plus years, I've seen every type of child grow up.
Instead of giving me what I wanted, she gave me what I needed, which was truth.
Don't let emotions win. Let truth win.
Do your very best, and you should have a lot of fun while you do it. And the better you get at something, the more fun you're going to have at something.
You moms and dads are wired with everything you need to be a parent to a great kid. Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. This is episode number 82, and I'm your host, Dr. Meg Meeker. On today's episode, we're bringing you a really important interview on the subject of immunizations. Now, I know this is a sensitive topic for some of you, but this is one of the most important podcasts we've done, so you need to listen. My guest is Dr. Candice Robinson. Dr. Robinson is a pediatrician in the Immunization Services Division who serves as the CDC's lead for ACIP's Childhood and Adolescent Immunization Schedule Work Group. So Dr. Robinson is one of the leading experts in the country on immunizations. On this day, I phoned into the studios of the CDC to conduct the interview with Dr. Candice Robinson. As always in the podcast, I'll share my points to ponder for you to start using right away. And remember, don't just download the episodes. Please click subscribe, because when you do that, you are joining my parenting revolution, and every new episode will automatically show up in your subscribed list. I promise. You won't regret it. And remember, I'd love for you to write us a review on iTunes. Let us know what you think. Not only are we on iTunes, but the Parenting Great Kids podcast is also available in the Google Play Store and on Stitcher. So no matter where you get your podcasts, subscribe today so you won't miss a single episode. I want you now to listen in on a conversation I had with Dr. Candice Robinson. I know you're really going to enjoy it. Candice, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're very busy at the CDC, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking about immunization.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You bet. You know, many of the parents that I see and hear from are afraid of giving their children immunizations. And I would love to have you answer some of their frequent questions. Can you just briefly discuss why childhood vaccines are so important?
Childhood vaccines are important because the recommended immunization schedule protects children from 14 potentially serious diseases before their second birthday. And while some vaccine-preventable diseases are no longer common in this country because of vaccines, some vaccine-preventable diseases like pertussis or whooping cough and chickenpox remain common in the United States.
And what about measles? You were telling me we recently had a measles outbreak.
Yes, measles is one of the most infectious diseases known to man. Measles virus can linger in the air for up to 2 hours after someone infected with measles has left the room. In addition, persons who are infected with measles are actually infectious, meaning they can spread the disease before they have symptoms. So they can be in the community and spread the disease without knowing that they are ill.
Right. And I think a lot of
times, since parents haven't seen these illnesses, measles, pertussis, epiglottitis, meningitis, I think there's a sense that parents have that they're really not that bad. So if they don't immunize their kids, they'll scoot by, and if they get sick, then we can treat them. Can you just discuss how serious a lot of these diseases are?
Well, a lot of these diseases are very serious. You can have complications from many of these diseases that include serious illness, hospitalization, additional infections that may happen during or following the illness, and even in some cases, these illnesses can cause death.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I remember a day when I was seeing epiglottitis. I've taken care of kids with meningitis, and it's honestly terrifying. And that gets me to another question. Many parents have said to me, you're using scare tactics to get us to immunize our kids. What would you say to that when parents would say that to you?
Well, I've seen these diseases as a pediatrician, and these diseases are potentially serious. I don't think that that's a scare tactic. I think that we just have to recognize that these diseases can be very serious for those who get the disease and who are not protected.
And I, like you, have seen a number of these. So when it came to my kids, that's why I just immunized all of my kids. Many parents are afraid or feel uncomfortable when their children are young of giving them multiple vaccinations at once. For instance, the combined vaccines. They're feeling that it might overwhelm the child's immune system. The question I have is many parents want to wait until their kids are older to start vaccinations, maybe kindergarten. And particularly they're afraid of the MMR vaccine because there's been so much talk about autism on the internet and so forth. What is wrong with starting kids from, say, age 5 or 6 and beginning their vaccination?
Before entering school, young children can be exposed to vaccine-preventable diseases from parents or other adults, their siblings, on a plane, at a child care center, or even at the grocery store. And children under 5 are especially susceptible to diseases because their immune systems haven't built up the defenses to fight the infection. So you don't want to wait to protect your children and risk getting the diseases when they need protection now before they get into school.
Right. And I think one of the points that I tell parents is your kids are being immunized every day just by life. They're exposed to many different things and sort of building up the immunity. They can get it just from being around other people, but that's a good thing because really what you're doing is you're recruiting your body's defense mechanisms to fight off anything that comes their way. Let's talk about the MMR vaccine for a moment. I think that's when the real concern and scare hit parents when they heard that MMR was associated with autism. Can you talk about the original report and what the report was about and then how that report was retracted and why?
The MMR vaccine, there was a report written some years ago by a physician regarding the MMR vaccine, but multiple studies have been done since the publication of that report. And the multiple studies have shown that there's no association between vaccines and autism.
But I think that there's so much in the mom bloggers and on the internet now, and we hear a lot of anecdotal evidence. For instance, someone will give their child or the pediatrician give them the MMR, and then a week later they come down with something and they blame it on the MMR. And I've read studies, correct me if I'm wrong, where you can tell whether a child has autism or not before the first year of life. My understanding is you can actually see it on brain scans in children under 6 months of age. Are you familiar with that?
That is not in my subject matter expertise. However, we do have scientists here at the CDC who work extensively on autism.
And so they are convinced that the MMR vaccine has nothing to do with autism.
Correct. The science has shown no association between MMR vaccine or any vaccine for that matter and autism.
And I think that where are the places that people can get the most accurate, up-to-date information about vaccines and safety?
There are several credible organizations that parents can go to find accurate information about vaccines and about vaccine safety. These include the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Family Physicians. Vaccinate Your Family is a good resource, as well as the CDC website. We have a page dedicated to vaccine safety.
And I send people to there, quite often. The other thing that can trouble parents is not just the vaccine themselves, the virus that they're protecting against, but the additives in vaccines, particularly thimerosal or other things, mercury. Can you talk about what is added to childhood immunizations that might or might not be a problem?
Regarding thimerosal, thimerosal is actually not currently in any of the routinely recommended childhood vaccines. The one exception to that is some multi-dose vials of the influenza vaccine. But all of the rest of the childhood vaccines no longer contain thimerosal. Thimerosal was removed from vaccines in the early 2000s out of an abundance of caution, though there had been no studies to indicate that thimerosal was harmful to children.
Wonderful. But it's not in the immunizations or the vaccines anymore.
Correct.
Good. I would like to talk about treatment of diseases when they come. I have had a number of patients say, well, I'm not going to immunize, and if my child gets pertussis, or if my child gets tetanus, or if my child gets meningitis, all I have to do is bring them into you, Dr. Meeker, and treat that. What is wrong with that kind of thinking?
Well, it's important to note that even with treatment, some of these diseases can still result in very serious complications and even death. So treatment doesn't necessarily protect the children and prevent complications for the children. Vaccines before getting disease are the best protection for children.
I think if parents can sort of look at vaccines from the standpoint, if your children don't have them, you're leaving them defenseless. If you do have vaccinations, you're really making your children's immune system very strong to fight off these infections. And it's interesting because, treating tetanus and treating pertussis and treating meningitis is extremely hard once the infection gets going in the body.
Very true. I think one analogy we often use on our website is the analogy of the safety of car seats and seat belts. We don't put the car seat or seat belt on, after they've been in an accident. You put them in the car seat before you get in an accident so that you protect them ahead of time. It's just the same with vaccines. You want to provide the vaccines to the children before they are potentially exposed to the disease to provide the best protection.
Yeah, that's a great analogy because parents are really concerned about safety, which is wonderful, the younger parents. And they go to great lengths to make sure that their kids are safe in a car, safe at home. But when it comes to vaccinations, I think there's this fear that we're putting poison in a child's body, but we really aren't. Now, this is kind of funny, and I know that a lot of parents feel this way, but I've seen this. Parents may feel that there's sort of this conspiracy that physicians have to give their kids vaccinations because they make money on them, which is not true, or that we are looking at only the science, we're not looking at the individual child in order to vaccinate them. Have you run into that before?
Certainly, that's something I have heard before. And there's actually been a lot of studies done on financing vaccines and in particular about physician practices and the fact that they don't make money off of vaccines. In fact, sometimes the physician practices lose money from vaccines. So there is some literature and some data out there about that.
It's absolutely true. As a matter of fact, some physicians lose money, so they encourage parents to take their kids to the health department. Let's talk about HPV, or Gardasil, the HPV vaccine. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends giving it to kids, in the pre-adolescent years. Can you talk about the HPV vaccine and why it's important in kids?
Certainly. HPV can cause 6 types of cancers in men and women, and HPV can cause cancers of the cervix and vagina or vulva in women, cancers of the penis in men, and cancers of the anus and the back of the throat in men and women. Mm-hmm. Every year, over 33,000 men and women are diagnosed with one of these cancers, and thanks to the HPV, we can now prevent over 90% of these cancers from ever developing. All boys and girls should get the HPV vaccine when they are 11 or 12 years old, and vaccines protect children before they are exposed to the HPV virus.
And does giving the HPV vaccine to children before or preteens, before they're sexually active, are there studies that shows that giving it to them condones sexual activity? Is it a green light for sexual activity? What are your thoughts on that?
Right. It's absolutely not a green light for sexual activity. And in fact, studies have shown that the HPV vaccine and getting the vaccine makes no difference in the timing of the beginning of sexual activity for young kids, for adolescents.
Parents, I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Dr. Candice Robinson. We need to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of my conversation with Dr. Candice Robinson. Parents, 1 in 6 kids in the United States faces hunger, and that number goes up during the summer months when kids don't have access to school meal programs. America's dairy farmers have been passionate about providing food to families for a long time, and this summer they're building on dairy's commitment to nourishing communities by partnering with Feeding America to fight childhood hunger. Dairy remains a simple, affordable source of many essential nutrients in a time when eating healthy only seems to get more complicated. It's beneficial for all ages because it provides essential nutrients your body needs like protein and calcium. And since 95% of dairy farms are family-owned, when you buy cheese, yogurt, or milk, you're supporting hard-working dairy farm families near you. In fact, most milk is made less than a 2-hour drive from where it's sold. Help get food to families who need it. Go to giveagallon.com to donate to a food bank in your community. Then, stay tuned at the end of this episode to hear about Karen Bonert, who is working hard to fight childhood hunger. With more than 70 sizes, including their signature half-cup sizes, Third Love designs bras with breast size and shape in mind for a perfect fit and premium feel. Just answer a few simple questions via Third Love's Fit Finder quiz to find your perfect fit in 60 seconds. Then, thanks to Third Love's 100% fit guarantee, you can wear, wash, and put your bra to the test for 60 days. And if you don't love it, you can return it, and Third Love will wash it and donate it to a woman in need. This is hands down the most comfortable bra you'll own, with straps that won't slip, tagless labels, and lightweight, super thin memory foam cups. Friends, you know that I love Third Love's bras. They are so comfortable, you don't even know you have it on. And the straps don't dig into your shoulders, and honestly and truly, they don't move throughout the day. Third Love knows there's a perfect bra for everyone. So right now, they're offering my listeners 15% off your first order. Go to thirdlove.com/Meg now to find your perfect fitting bra and get 15% off your first purchase. That's thirdlove.com/Meg for 15% off today.
You know, I use the HPV vaccine in my practice to talk to kids about how serious sexual activity is, and the fact that we now have a vaccination to prevent infections and cancers, and that sexual activity should never be taken lightly. So what I've seen personally is that kids will delay sexual activity. Some parents say, my child is not sexually active, particularly with girls. I'm not going to vaccinate against HPV because she doesn't need it. What would you say to a parent who says that?
Well, I would say that, your child is not sexually active now, but one day they may be married or in a long-term relationship, and, they may be sexually active at that time. You may know that your child is not sexually active, but their future partner could have been. And so giving them their HPV vaccine really protects them from obtaining the HPV virus at any time in the future.
Because sometimes if one person is a virgin when they get married, there's no guarantee the other person is going to be a virgin, and therefore the infected person can easily transmit HPV to the non-infected partner, because it's very ubiquitous, isn't it? How many people in the United States are infected with HPV now?
It's actually estimated that each year there are millions of people infected with HPV, and I believe somewhere on the order of about 14.8 million a year. A lot of people have it, and some people may not even know that they have the HPV virus.
What are the symptoms of HPV virus?
There may be no symptoms at all. And in some cases, people may not know unless they have, for instance, for women, get a pap smear. And if the HPV virus appears on the pap smear, they may know. Or if they have genital warts or other lesions, they may know. But some people get HPV virus and they don't know. They don't have signs or symptoms of the virus.
You're right. I think it's very important to educate kids as they get older and they're sexually active, how important it is to get pap smears, because, you may not have symptoms. Now, there are many strains of HPV, and even with the higher risk strains, just because a person has HPV does not mean they're going to get cancer from that. So how does the body decide who gets cancer and who doesn't?
That's a great question. Some people who get the HPV virus actually clear the infection on their own without having any signs or symptoms of the virus. For some people, the HPV virus results in warts or other lesions that we mentioned earlier. For some women, the virus results in an abnormal pap smear and requires further testing for that woman. And in some cases, the virus causes cancers. And there's no way to know ahead of time if you are one who may get cancer.
And that's the $1 million question. If I could see a patient and go, okay, you're more likely to get cancer than this other young woman, I'm going to vaccinate you and not her. But you really can't do that. And so from where we sit, since we don't have a crystal ball, we have to protect and cover everybody. If a girl does get HPV and it does turn cancerous, what are the problems she can run into down the road as far as fertility and her future gynecological health?
Well, it really depends on what happens with that. But a woman who has an abnormal pap smear will often have to undergo further tests or further pap smear to confirm whether or not they have HPV and whether or not there are any abnormal lesions. Sometimes these abnormal lesions are treated through therapies. Sometimes it involves removing part of the cervix. And in severe cases or cancers, it could even result in the woman having to have her uterus removed. Mm-hmm. So it could impact fertility in the future.
Yeah. So is it possible then that a young person, a teenager or a gal in her 20s, because of HPV infection, could become a high-risk pregnancy?
It's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Depending on the treatment that she had to undergo because of the HPV virus.
Yeah. So we don't want to scare parents or young women, but at the same time, I think it's important to give them sobering information, because in my experience, a lot of teenagers and gals in their 20s, even boys in their 20s, don't know about HPV and they haven't been educated about it. And talk about giving the HPV vaccine to boys, if you would.
Certainly. As mentioned earlier, CDC recommends that both boys and girls be vaccinated with the HPV vaccine when they're 11 to 12 years old. And HPV, in addition to causing cancers of the cervix and vagina in women, can also cause cancers of the penis in men. It can cause cancers of the anus and cancers in the back of the throat in men. Men can also experience genital warts, and men can also pass the HPV virus from one partner to another.
And that's an important thing to remember, that, yes, women, because our anatomy is more complex than men's, that men are the ones who can contribute, more to the women. And I think, as I tell my patients, you may be working hard with your daughter to delay the sexual debut, but my experience is they don't work that hard with boys because I don't know if it's sort of tradition. They assume boys are going to be sexually active, but it's really important for parents to understand that boys are the ones who give it to the young girls. In closing, we don't have much time left, but I would like for us to picture maybe the single mom or the young mom out there who has an 18-month-old or 2-year-old who said, I don't care what you say, I'm not going to give my child these immunizations because in my gut, I just can't get over the fact that it could harm them. What would you say, and how would you allay that young woman's fears?
Well, I would say these vaccines protect against illnesses that are potentially very serious in infants, young children, adolescents, and in some cases, even adults. And I think, it's important to give your child the best protection possible before they are potentially exposed to the illnesses so that they are protected against these potentially very serious diseases.
One of the concerns that parents have when their children are young, particularly 6 months of age and younger, is that giving vaccines that are combined or giving multiple vaccines at once, 3 or 4 at a time, will overwhelm the child's immune system. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Certainly. Babies are exposed to thousands of germs and other antigens in the environment from the time they're born. So when a baby is born, his or her immune system is ready to respond to the many antigens in the environment and selected antigens in vaccines. Vaccines contain weakened or killed versions of germs that cause disease. And so the infant's immune system is ready to respond when they're born to these weakened versions of the germs.
And what about, some parents will say, well, I don't want to give my child so many shots at once. It's painful and it's just not fair. Have you ever gotten questions like that?
These vaccines are made to protect against the illnesses. Certainly, it can be uncomfortable as a parent to see your child cry. However, there are strategies that parents can use for children who are getting vaccines, such as distracting them from the vaccine and offering other comfort measures to make it an easier experience for the parent and the child.
Let's just talk about how much of the virus are kids really getting? Because I loved when you said they're just getting a tiny bit. They're not getting a lot of the virus.
As I mentioned, vaccines contained weakened or killed versions of the germs that cause the vaccine-preventable diseases. And as a result, the kids get the protection against these diseases without risking the complications that they could have by actually obtaining the disease itself.
And if a parent does follow the recommended schedule for vaccination, what are the complications that the child could experience?
Most of the side effects following vaccines are mild. You could have swelling or redness at the injection site. Serious adverse reactions to vaccines are very rare. And
finally, what about the fact that we have very porous borders in the United States? We've got people coming in from other countries where they may still have some polio or where children may not be vaccinated. Is that a concern for you at the CDC about people from other countries bringing infections into the U.S.?
Well, I think it's important to note that, even though many serious vaccine preventable diseases are uncommon here in the United States, some diseases like measles are common in other parts of the world. And so even if your family doesn't travel internationally, you could come in contact with someone who has traveled internationally or someone with one of these vaccine preventable diseases anywhere in your community.
And is polio alive and well in any countries?
Polio is still in some countries, but I'd have to give, the exact number of cases I'd have to look up.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. Because I think sometimes there's a sense that it's eradicated worldwide. and to realize, no, I mean, there's still some cases around, and even though we don't have it in the United States, it doesn't mean that we won't, in the future.
Right.
So if every parent in the United States chose not to immunize their children, what would you anticipate the country to look like in 20 years?
If we stopped vaccinating, the few cases we have of vaccine-preventable diseases for some of the illnesses could very quickly become tens or hundreds of thousands of cases, as we've seen with measles this year. Vaccine-preventable diseases can spread very quickly in communities with large numbers of unvaccinated people.
Mm-hmm. Well, they can, and I think many are so contagious, and kids can't control whether they're exposed or not. Something like HPV potentially can control it, but I think with, some of the respiratory contagious infections, it's really hard to prevent those. Candice, this has been wonderful. I hope that, our listeners have gained a lot by our conversation. I hope that their fears have been allayed because, as you and I know, these are very, very serious infections. And the fact that we have the ability now to keep these infections at bay from so many children is extremely important. And I loved what you said about the safety with the car seats. We really need to include immunizations as a huge part of being fastidious about maintaining the safety of our children.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Now on to my points to ponder. 1, don't make decisions out of fear, but out of scientific knowledge. Most parents read a lot about immunizations on the internet, and most sources that they get their information from are not accurate. And that's why it's critically important to pay attention to the source of the information that you're getting. Ask yourself, is it on a website that's for mothers, that's written by somebody who doesn't have any medical experience? Is it a person who's writing just about their own personal experience, but they really don't understand the medical facts? So it's very important to know that the information you're getting is not just anecdotal. In other words, their own personal experience with their child. And if it's written by someone who has an agenda, the information they give you won't be objective. So learn the facts about immunizations before making a decision and then decide. Remember, no parenting decision you make should be made out of fear, particularly when it comes to immunizing against life-threatening illnesses. So learn the real facts before you make a decision and then decide. No parenting decision should ever be made out of fear. 2, immunizations protect against life-threatening illnesses. Many of us don't fear the illnesses because we don't see them. But remember, pertussis or whooping cough causes life-threatening airway blockage. That means if your child gets pertussis, the infection could progress to the point where your child literally can't breathe because the airway closes off. Hib or HIB, Haemophilus influenza B, that your kids get immunized in early childhood, causes something called epiglottitis. And the epiglottis is a piece of tissue way back in the throat that when it swells because of infection can close off a child's airway in a matter of seconds. I used to see epiglottitis not infrequently in the 80s and early 90s, but I have not seen a case of epiglottitis in years because of the Hib vaccines. Measles, that we're seeing a resurgence of now in the United States because of lack of immunizations, can cause death. Polio can come back to the United States because of infected people from other countries. And if your child is not immunized, their chance of contracting polio goes way up. Each of these illnesses need to be taken seriously. They are real. They are out there. They're life-threatening. And just because we don't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. Immunization, with immunizations, the benefits far outweigh the risks. Number 3, Immunizations do not cause autism. Reports of autism linked to MMR vaccine have been debunked, not only by numerous studies that have been done since that report, but also by the original reporters themselves. Remember, the report was not a study, but it was simply made by some doctors who noticed that autism was being diagnosed around the time the MMR was given. That doesn't mean there was a cause and effect. And even in the paper, they said that. They said it was just a coincidence that was occurring. However, during that time, doctors were diagnosing autism later than they are now. So they were diagnosing autism around age 15 months, which is around when the MMR used to be given. But now we can diagnose autism much earlier than when the MMR is given. In addition to that, studies have shown that there are actual brain changes we can see on scans in children of autism as early as 6 months of age that we don't see in brain scans of children who don't have autism. All right, parents, let's get social. I want to hear from you and interact with you. You can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Meg Meeker, MD. Or if you have a question, any question, send it to askmeg@megmeekermd.com. Today I have a question from Carrie who writes, Dr. Meeker, I agree with your article on limited phone time. And we did that when our kids were in high school. But now they're 19 and 21, and we still feel that social media is damaging. Our oldest didn't do well in college this year, and we feel her phone addiction had something to do with it. Now that she's home for the summer, we're limiting phone time, and she complains constantly. Just wondering if you have any advice. Yes, I do. Carrie, first of all, kudos to you for being a strong parent, recognizing the damage that's being done to your daughters with too much phone use and too much social media. So I'm really glad that you limited when they were young. Now, here's my rule about college kids or post-college kids coming to live back at home. I don't care if your daughters are 19, 21, 25, or 30. If your kids are living under your roof, it's your rules. You own the home. You're being kind enough to open up your home and to allow them to live with you, because anytime after the age of 18, you don't have an obligation to allow your kids to live at home. Many parents feel that they do, but the truth of the matter is they don't. So the fact that your 19 and 21-year-old are living at home, whether it's for the summer or whether it's for a couple of years, is a privilege that they have. That said, when they're living at your home, they have to follow your rules. And if they don't like your rules, they can get an apartment on their own and pay for that apartment. So your rules in your home need to be honored. When our kids came home and lived after college, our rules were this. We don't go to sleep until you're home at night. And because we need to go to sleep by midnight, you need to be home by midnight. And if you don't like it, then you can find an apartment. You need to honor other rules that we have. We only speak certain ways in our home. We don't swear. We don't say shut up, and we're not mean to each other. If you don't abide by those rules, you can find another place to live. And there are a handful of other rules that we have. I think, honestly, if you have a child that's out of college and they're living at home, they should be paying rent. Life shouldn't be easy. They need to start to learn in the real world. And a lot of that learning needs to be how to handle things like phone use, particularly other influences that could be potentially addictive, drugs, alcohol, anything else. So here's what I recommend you do with your daughters when they're living at home. You make the rules about phone use. Now, you can only make rules about what happens in your home because obviously if they're out of your home and they're out with friends, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. However, they should be paying for their phone bill. You should limit the amount of time that they're on the phone when they're in your home. You can limit that to anything you want. Personally, I think 2 hours a day is fine. They've got laptops, they've got iPads, that kind of a thing. But for phone use, you've got to decide what you're comfortable with And if you believe that your daughter is addicted, then you need to treat her like she has a real addiction. You need to wean her from phone time. And if you need to start out with 4 hours a day, then 3 hours a day, then 2 hours a day, you need to stick by your guns and say, if you're going to live here, that's what needs to happen. For 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening, you can be on your phone. But other than that, your phone is plugged in the kitchen. I strongly advocate no phones in bedrooms at night, period. Everyone's phone, including your and your husband's phone, need to be plugged in the kitchen at night. Sleep disturbance is a real issue with people and phones. There's no reason for a kid or an adult to have a phone in the bedroom at night, period. So the other final thing I would encourage you to do is whatever restrictions you have with your daughter and your phone, you need to be willing to follow those as well, because kids learn their habits from us. And if we're on our phones constantly, guess what? We're teaching our kids to be on their phones constantly. So Carrie, you've had a great plan. You've followed through with your plan. You know that it worked for your kids in high school. Follow it through. Be strict about it. Know that you have the right to implement these rules, and that your daughter should understand that living in your home after college or during college in the summer is a privilege, not a right. Parents, I love answering your questions, so keep sending them in to me. You can email me your parenting questions to askmeg@megmeekermd.com. Again, that's askmeg@megmeekermd.com. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Candice Robinson. You can find out more about immunization at the website for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Simply go to cdc.gov. Again, that's cdc.gov. Please go there. Read about immunizations. If you want to go to webmd.com as well, you'll get great, accurate scientific information about immunizations at either of these two spots. Let's recap my points to ponder. 1, don't make decisions out of fear, but out of scientific knowledge. 2, immunizations protect against life-threatening illnesses. And 3, immunizations do not cause autism. So until next time, parents, remember, great kids are raised, not born.
Hey, this is Bobby, producer of Meg Meeker's Parenting Great Kids podcast. Thanks for listening to episode 82, Immunizations. And because of your dedication to raising great kids, Dr. Meg's Parenting Revolution has grown to over 3 million downloads. Head on over to Facebook and Twitter and follow @MegMeekerMD and check out what's new at megmeeker.com. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter to stay updated and get information about giveaways. Don't forget to share the podcast with other parents, subscribe so you won't miss anything, and leave us a review so we know how we're doing.
This episode is brought to you by Undeniably Dairy and their Give a Gallon initiative. Millions of people live every day in food-insecure homes, and childhood hunger is a growing problem in today's society. America's dairy farmers have long been passionate about providing food to families, and this summer they're building on their commitment to nourishing communities by partnering with Feeding America to fight childhood hunger. Dairy is a simple, affordable source of many essential nutrients in a time when eating healthy only seems to get more complicated. And 95% of dairy farms are family-owned. So when you buy cheese, yogurt, or milk for your local food bank, you're supporting hard-working dairy farm families near you. Families like Karen Bonert's.
My name is Karen Bonert, and we're part of Bonert Jersey Dairy Farm in East Moline, Illinois. I was born underneath a cow, if you will. I grew up on a family dairy farm in Central Oregon and learned firsthand the true meaning of hard work and dedication. I moved east after I graduated college at Oregon State, and through my path met eventually my soon-to-be husband, now of 16 years, Scott, who is a dairy farmer here in East Moline.
Not only did Karen grow up on a dairy farm, she married into one.
I always tell people that it's kind of a 4-H project gone a little crazy, because my husband and his brother Brian are first-generation dairy farmers on his side of the family. And they had bought a couple of Jersey cows for 4-H projects. And soon they kind of duplicated, if you will. And so our 2 cows now equal to 500 milk cows.
And now she's raising a third generation of boners, the same way she grew up.
We have 3 children, Tyler, who's 15, Cassie, who's 13, and Jacob, who's 9. And they live and work on the family farm with us. So we're living the dream.
As a farmer, Karen is a natural empath, but her experiences at home and in her community has strengthened her resolve to fight childhood hunger.
Well, I remember many moons ago, being around our kitchen table and my father having that conversation about how he grew up so poor and would go without food, and how that he was determined that would never be us, that there would always be able to be food on the table because many others are not as fortunate as we were. And as a kid, to be honest, I didn't really understand. I couldn't understand because I always had 3 meals a day provided for me. But now, later in my life, when I became a mom, I remember my oldest, Tyler, when he was 7 years old, came home from school one day and he was really in a mood. And I was like, buddy, what's going on? And he just said, it's not fair. And the more we talked about it, I was like, well, what's not fair? And he said, well, some of his classmates were getting sent home with a backpack full of food and he didn't get one. So that wasn't fair. And I was like, well, the reason you're not getting one, and I opened up the pantry and opened up the refrigerator, is because we have all of this. And so he's always been one to be very smart and kind of catches on quickly and said, you mean they don't have any food at their house? And I said, many of them, that's what they get to eat over the weekend. And I still remember to this day seeing my 7-year-old, his eyes, his big brown eyes, swelled up with tears, like it hit him at a young age. And I think that's what spurred me to always make sure that him and my other 2 kids and any of their friends that would come over would always have access to snacks or meals because, we're one of the lucky ones that are fortunate enough to have readily accessible food in our pantry and in our refrigerator. And naturally, as farmers, we're caretakers. And so I think because I'm married to a dairy farmer, I grew up on a dairy farm, I want to be that caretaker of other people as well.
People like Karen are getting their hands dirty day in and day out to fight childhood hunger, and you can help too.
Dairy farmers, just like us here in East Moline, we can't do it alone. Everybody can do a small part by giving a gallon of milk, and that has a huge impact in helping us fight this growing problem in America. People can help. They can go to giveagallon.com, and as little as $5 can make a huge impact by donating a gallon of milk to help feed America and help feed those most in need.
Just go to giveagallon.com to donate today.